Hello there, I'd like to introduce you to the ISM software. When you download the software, you load it from your computer here. Just going to place the software in full screen mode. Okay, when the software opens, this is what you'll see. You've got a number of tabs at the top. Workshop information, where you fill in details of the trigger question, the context statement, the title of your workshop, the date, host organization, location, and objectives. Second tab is where you enter information on your participants. The third tab is where you enter the ideas that you're going to structure in the session. The fourth tab deals with the voting data and how you select ideas via voting for structuring. There's a categories tab that we're working on at the moment, and I'll introduce you to that. And finally, there's the structuring tab, where you structure ideas and build your structural models. So ISM stands for Interpretive Structural Modeling. This was a methodology developed by John Warfield, and the tool helps to facilitate collective intelligence. So let's walk through step by step how you use the software. Okay, so you have a session, collective intelligence session, that you're about to run. In our case, we're looking at the C for Society. The context statement for that is entered here. C for Society is about influencing human behavior and the choices we make, and so on. So the trigger question for the C for Society group is this particular guiding question. So I'm just going to cut and paste so that I get the wording right here. The trigger question is entered here. This is the question that the group uses to generate ideas. So what are the barriers to a sustainable human marine ecosystem in relation to human health? So we might put a simple title on this: stakeholder consultation. The date, we'll just use today's date, 28th of the 2nd, 2013. Location, wherever you are, and the objectives here, which are the objectives of the C for Society project, if you can enter there if you wish. So the second tab deals with the participants. Who are your stakeholders? Enter their details here. John Spencer. What's his title? Where is he from? Stakeholder 1. What's his address? State, city, and drop down menu for country. Let's just say he's from France. Telephone number, and so on. So you can enter all his details there and save his details over. And we want a new participant. Then I'll just enter names at this point rather than full details, just to show you the process. Okay, so I've entered a few names just to show you the process of that step. Now, the ideas for structuring. So the ideas, this is the ideas that the group generates in response to the trigger question. So barriers to sustainable marine ecosystems. Some of the ideas that came up in the sessions included lack of adequate scientific knowledge. Enter that idea. A new idea. Another idea, inadequate funding for research. Another idea, the focus on short-term policies. Difficulty exploiting resources. Unwillingness to change harmful practices. Maybe we'll enter one more. No ownership of the seas was another one that came up. Obviously your group will generate a lot more ideas in your session, and you enter all the ideas there. You won't necessarily have any labels you want to attach to them, or any category labels that you want to attach to them at this point. So the group has generated a lot of ideas, and the next tab deals with how the group votes in relation to those ideas. So the voting tab is used to compute the number of votes that each idea receives and the weighted votes. So in the sessions, participants are asked to select 5 critical ideas and rank order them from the most critical barrier to the least critical barrier, and those votes are then entered here. So depending on which ideas they select, so Francis Henry may have selected as the most critical idea inadequate funding for research, so she would have listed number 2 first, and then she may have selected as the second most critical barrier lack of adequate scientific knowledge. That's the second idea, that's the number 1 is entered, and so on. So she may have selected idea 4, 3 and 6. So that's her selection, her rank ordered selection from the most to the least critical. So 5 of 5 votes have been entered here. Mary then may have a different selection. George has a different selection. Frank's selection, and John's selection. Once those are entered, you'll see down below here it tells you idea number 1 has received 5 votes. In other words, everyone has selected this idea somewhere, and some of them have ranked it quite highly. So this is the weighted count. This is receives a weighted score of 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4 plus 1, which amounts to a weighted score of 16. So the weighted vote score is computed by the software. If you click on this tab here, it reorders them from most to least or least to most votes, and it's useful to arrange them from those that received most to those that received least votes. So when it comes to selecting ideas, you are characteristically selecting ideas that received the most votes for structuring. Again, you'll have a lot more ideas in your set, and that information will all be presented to you, but you might want to select, as we've said, the top 10 or 12 items for structuring. So in our case, we'll just select a few items for structuring, and we're just moving them over, selecting them and moving them over for structuring. Well, we may as well select them all in the first instance. So this is your structuring set. we've just added a new feature here. If you wanted to reorder the set for any reason, you select an idea, you want to move it up. And this is essentially the order in which the ideas will be structured. So if you want to place a particular order on the ideas for structuring, you can do that. But characteristically, what's been moved into this box, as I say, are the ideas that have received the most votes. They're the most critical barriers to sustainable marine ecosystem, and these are the barriers that we want to structure. So once they have been selected, voted upon, and selected for structuring, we now have a structuring set here. We can create additional structuring sets if we like. So you might come back another time, either with the same group or with some of your colleagues. You want to structure a different set of ideas, and that's your second set. In this case it's a smaller set. We go back to the first set that we have here, and I'll briefly show you the categorization tab. There's going to be a further iteration of the categorization tab in the next version of the software, but it's relatively straightforward how it works. The participants are going to categorize the ideas on the wall in your sessions, but if you want to keep a record of how they've categorized them on the wall, you can use this card sorting feature, where the related ideas are placed into categories. So we place the scientific issue and funding issue together, maybe the policy issue here in the second category. Unwillingness to change might be a policy issue. We might have a new category then, difficulty exploiting resources. Maybe no ownership of the seas is in the same category, maybe it's in a different category. So we're just adding categories here, and then we give them labels. As the group develops their categorization on the wall, they will label these categories. We'll say scientific, category 2, policy, category 3, applied research, something like that. This one has to do with, we'll say, global policy or something like that. So as I say, this will be developed in the next iteration, and what you'll be able to do then is just save this categorized data out to a Word file, which is useful for the writing of your report later on. So the next tab is the structuring tab, and what you want to do is you want to select, well, which set are you structuring, which set of barriers are you structuring. This is the fuller set here, and we want to change this keyword relational significantly. We got the L. Just to press enter if you make any edit changes, press enter and it'll update here the relational phrase. Now we've added a new feature here. You can orient characteristically left to right, but you can also reorient top to bottom or bottom to top. Normally we arrange this left to right. So these are your ideas for structuring. We've also got the information we can add to the left and the right here. So does, and to the right we add the question mark. So it reads, does inadequate funding for research significantly aggravate a focus on short-term policies, question mark. So this tends to read well. So there's a few things here. You'll see, first off, I suppose, is that you can view this in full screen, and when you're presenting these questions to participants, you normally toggle to the full screen view, and then this is what will be presented to them on the screen. Sometimes you want to put in the context statement here, or some supporting context statement to help them to interpret the question. So just go back to the I click this again to go back to the ordinary view. So the context statement might be in the context of achieving, maybe achieving a sustainable marine ecosystem. Or perhaps in the context of barriers to a sustainable marine ecosystem. Does inadequate funding for research significantly aggravate, and we get rid of the S at the end of that. Focus on short-term policies. So if you've got it set up like this now, you can toggle to the full screen and start to present these questions to participants. So participants work through their logic here, and they make their decisions, and they cast their votes. Again, if 60% of the group decide that this is indeed a yes, that inadequate funding for research does indeed aggravate a focus on short-term policies, then you'd say yes. Perhaps it's a no in this case. Does a focus on short-term policies significantly aggravate inadequate funding for research? This may be a yes. And so on, they read through. Inadequate funding for research aggravate difficulty exploiting resources. Perhaps it's a yes. Perhaps it's a no. And I'm just entering some votes more at random at this point. Once they have gone through all of those decisions, you get the following message that structuring is complete. And you can go back and view the structure that the group has generated. So we can just view that graph. And if we want to save that or make a copy, we can make a copy of that graph for import into a Word document. Okay, there's another feature here that's quite useful. The group, we're exporting that graph. Okay, so you want to export it as a figure that you can then insert into a document. That's how you do that. But I just wanted to show you another feature here. We'll say again that you view the graph, and the group is not happy with where they've placed a particular element in the structure, and they want to maybe restructure an element. You can do that by going back into the voting tab. So the element they may want to restructure, we'll say, is the difficulty exploiting resources. They don't like where they've positioned that in the structure. So you simply take that out and then select it back in. So by taking it out of the matrix and putting it back into the matrix, what you get is an option to essentially go back into the structuring tab and reconsider how this particular issue relates to the other barriers. So you go back to structuring again, go back to full screen mode. Does unwillingness to change harmful practices significantly aggravate difficulty exploiting resources? They might say no to that. Does difficulty exploiting resources significantly aggravate unwillingness to change harmful practices? They may say no to that. So we've finished structuring and we've generated a new structure. I don't seem to have altered its position here, but that's because I probably made the same decisions as before. Let's maybe take another example of that where we change the position of something completely. Let's take this issue here, lack of scientific knowledge, and let's assume, for example, that it negatively influences the focus on short-term policies. So let's just keep that in mind. Let's take this element out and restructure it so that it now appears on the other side of the structure. So I'm going to go back to the voting. Take out lack of adequate scientific knowledge. Place that back in. Go back to structuring. Toggle the full screen. So here we are. This is the key critical question, I think. So we'll probably place it now at the yes, okay. You can see now we've actually altered the structure quite considerably in this way. So just to let you know that you can take out an element and restructure it, and if you do, let me just view this graph, sorry. If you do, you may well change the structure that you've generated. It's not very common that a group will necessarily want to restructure. Generally, if they've deliberated quite carefully, they're happy with the logic that they have generated in the structure. Okay, so that's a brief tour of the software. Just some additional features: to save your file, save as. I'll give this a name. In the C for Society folder. We'll just call this well, let's give it a fuller name. C for Society training video. Okay, save that. Okay, so this just windows, the various windows that you can move between, although you can move between them on the tabs also. So that's it really. It's very intuitive, user-friendly. Input information on the workshop, the participants. This links to the voting tab where the participants' names are used to sort of code the selection of ideas, the rank ordering of ideas, which is used then to weight the most critical barriers that are selected over for structuring. And then you've got your structuring tab. So core and central to your work is the entering of ideas, the voting and selection of ideas, and the structuring of ideas. You'll be categorizing the ideas on the wall, but you'll also have the option of recreating those categories in the software here and saving that category data as a Word document, so that you've got that information on the categories stored. As a document. And yeah, that's it. So when you're done, you can just close the file. Essentially all the data that you've collected on the participants in terms of their ideas, votes, and the structuring work that they've done, all of that is saved once you close the file, and when you reopen it, all that information reappears again, and the structuring that you've done, it all reappears again. So once we're done, we close file and save our work. Okay, thanks very much. If you have any more questions, let me know.